Have you ever been accused of something you did not do, even if it was something small like hitting your sibling? Well, this is exactly what happened to Mary Elizabeth Surratt. Miss Surratt has the sad distinction to be known as the first woman to be hung by the U.S. government for being considered part of the conspiracy plot to kill Abraham Lincoln. However, she was wrongly accused. She was innocent. So the problem is that Mary Elizabeth Surratt was wrongly accused of something she did not do. The solution to this is persuading everyone that she is innocent. I will give evidence to fix this problem. I will persuade the audience that Mary Surratt was innocent in the following speech by telling this. 1. That she admitted to knowing about the plot to kidnap Lincoln. If she knew the plot to kill him, she would not have admitted to knowing about the kidnapping because she would only be convicting herself. Also, the military tribunal was unjust and her attorneys were insufficient. Next, the public was mad and upset over Lincoln's death and wanted someone to blame. Furthermore, since they could not catch her son like they intended, they wanted to get someone, and she was the one they got. Finally, the evidence was insufficient to convict her, and most of it was hearsay. Further, there was evidence to prove her innocence that had been withheld by the government at the time of the trial. Most of the evidence I used in the speech comes from search sites such as JSTOR and EBSCOhost. So if Mary Surratt was guilty, she would not have mentioned knowing about the plot to kidnap Lincoln. Also, the military tribunal was unjust and her lawyers were insufficient. As Janet Coryell stated, the truth is most likely that Surratt knew of Booth's plot to kidnap the president, but not about the plot to murder him. In her trial, Surratt did admit to her lawyer that she had known of the plot to kidnap Lincoln. Furthermore, most historians believe that the assassination was a plan conceived on the spur of the moment, proving Surratt's innocence further. Moreover, Surratt's military tribunal was unjust and inappropriate, and not only allowed military figures to judge her rather than a jury of her peers, but it did not allow her to defend herself in her trial. Finally, she was represented by lawyers who were insufficient. She was first going to be represented by a senator from Maryland, but the case was passed to 2 of his junior attorneys who were not up to the job. Next, to help prove her innocence, is the idea that the public was mad and upset over Lincoln's death, and they wanted someone to take the blame and be the scapegoat. Furthermore, since they could not catch her son as they intended to do, they settled for his mother instead. Surratt's trial was set amid the hysteria and anger of the public that was brought on by the death of Lincoln and the vengeful desire of the nation to find a scapegoat. As Surratt's innocence can be furthered when you look at the 9-member military commission of Union officers who controlled the proceedings proved to be biased, believing that Miss Surratt was guilty. Moreover, it is said that when Secretary of War Edwin Stanton was confronted by Surratt's lawyer about how John Surratt, Mary's son, was the one they really wanted, Stanton said he would settle for either. This shows that they just wanted Mary because they could not get her son. Finally, to bring Mary's innocence to a wrap is that the evidence was insufficient to convict her, and most of it was hearsay. Also, there was evidence to prove her innocence that had been withheld by the government at the time of the trial. Most of the evidence to convict Mary came from 2 men who were very unreliable and should not have been taken into consideration during the trial. This evidence came from Lewis Wickman and John Lloyd. Wickman was a boarder at the Surratt's boarding house who stated during the trial that he had seen both Booth and Surratt conversing along with other conspirators on the day of the assassination. However, Wickman had stated before that Surratt was ladylike in every particular. Also, Wickman's testimony was intoxicated by the fact that the Secretary of War, Stanton, had threatened to arrest him as a conspirator and even threatened him with his own death. While Lloyd was also key in the convicting of Surratt, his testimony had some faults as well. Because as Surratt's lawyer stated, Lloyd was most generally drunk for the majority of the time, and Lloyd had even stated later that drinking had affected his memory, but he was not sure of the facts surrounding the case. Consequently, this helps to further prove Surratt's innocence. Next, it is said that the evidence that would have proved the innocence of Mary was withheld at the time, such as Booth's diary. Such evidence that would prove her innocence is that on the day of the assassination, Booth gave a fellow actor, John Matthews, a letter that had all the names of the conspirators without Surratt's name on it, which Booth had no reason to leave off. This letter was not brought up until 2 years after Mary's death. Furthermore, Louis Payne, who was also a conspirator who hung, whose Secretary of State at the time said he was singularly truthful, had stated, "In the presence of Almighty God, I swear Miss Surratt is innocent of the crime charged against her." Payne had nothing to gain from this except telling the truth. Finally, Mary steadfastly maintained her innocence up to her death. So Mary Surratt was a woman who was wrongly accused and had to pay the ultimate price when she was innocent. The insufficient jury and lawyers, the public's anger and desire to find a scapegoat, and finally the lack of sufficient evidence all proved Mary Surratt's innocence. I hope you now believe in her innocence and understand why she is innocent. Thank you for listening.